I knew things were going south when I walked into the server room Monday morning and heard silence instead of the usual hum of cooling fans. That room had been my second home for 8 years, the place where I kept the financial heartbeat of Southwest Building Materials pumping. Without me, 12,000 construction workers across Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado don't get their paychecks. When construction workers don't get paid, they don't just complain, they park their equipment and walk off the job. I'm Brian Thompson, 48 years old, and I've been the senior database administrator here since this company was half its current size. I run the payroll back end for everything from concrete pourers in Houston to crane operators in Phoenix. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest work, and I'm damn good at it. Let me tell you something about construction payroll. It's not like running numbers for some office workers. These guys work in the heat, in the cold, on weekends, through holidays. They climb 20 stories up on steel beams. They pour concrete in 110-degree weather. They work overtime when a storm hits and people need their power back. They deserve every penny they earn, and they deserve to get it on time. The system I maintain isn't some sleek, cloud-based wonder that the sales brochures promise. It's a beast built on legacy SQL databases, custom scripts, and 8 years of patches that I've applied with the precision of a master mechanic working on a vintage Harley. I know every workaround, every quirk, every potential failure point. When the prevailing wage laws changed in Arizona last year, I rewrote the calculation engine in 3 days. When OSHA updated their reporting requirements, I built the compliance module from scratch while drinking bourbon and listening to Skinnerd at 2 in the morning. You want to know how complex this stuff gets? Try calculating overtime for a crew that starts work in Texas on Monday, moves to a job site in New Mexico on Wednesday, then finishes the week in Colorado. Each state has different labor laws, different tax rates, different union rules. Then factor in equipment rental time, hazard pay for working near chemical storage, and federal prevailing wages for government contracts. Ashley's Excel sheet was about to meet reality, and reality doesn't care about your pivot tables. But corporate doesn't see it that way. They see an old system that needs modernizing, and they see me as the guy standing in the way of progress. That's where Andrew Rodriguez comes in. Andrew is the VP of Operations, and more importantly, he's the chairman's son. 3 months ago, our company got acquired by Rodriguez Family Holdings, a construction conglomerate that owns everything from cement plants to equipment rental chains. Andrew came in with a mandate to streamline operations and eliminate redundancies. Translation: fire expensive people and replace them with cheaper solutions. I'd met Andrew a few times in passing. He's one of those guys who wears a suit to construction sites and stays in his air-conditioned truck while real workers sweat their asses off in the sun. Got his MBA from some prestigious school and thinks every business problem can be solved with a PowerPoint presentation and buzzwords like digital transformation and operational efficiency. He's never spent a day on a construction site, never had to calculate overtime for a crew working emergency storm repairs, never had to explain to a single mother why her paycheck is late because the system crashed. The meeting happened on a Tuesday. Andrew called me into his office along with Patricia Williams from HR. Patricia's been here almost as long as I have, but she's always been more worried about protecting the company than protecting the employees. She's got that nervous energy of someone who knows bad news is coming but has to deliver it with a smile. Andrew's office looked like something out of a corporate magazine. Glass desk, leather chairs, and a view of the equipment yard that he probably never actually looked at. He was tapping on his tablet when I walked in, making me wait while he finished whatever earth-shattering task required his immediate attention. "Brian," Andrew said, not bothering to look up from his tablet, "we're restructuring the IT department, moving to a more agile, cost-effective model." I sat down in the chair across from his desk. "What does that mean for payroll operations?" That's where it gets exciting. Andrew finally looked at me, flashing the kind of smile that car salesmen practice in mirrors. "I want you to meet my niece, Ashley. She just finished her MBA and she's built an incredible model that's going to revolutionize how we handle payroll. Here's the thing about family businesses. Competence takes a back seat to bloodlines every time. I'd seen it before in other companies, but I thought our operation was too critical for that kind of nonsense. I was wrong. Ashley Rodriguez walked in like she owned the place, which technically, through family connections, she kind of did. She was 25, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than most of our workers make in a week, and carrying an iPad like it was the holy grail of business solutions. "Hi, Brian," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've been reviewing your processes. Very thorough, but also very manual. I think we can do better." The way she said manual made it sound like I was still using an abacus and stone tablets. "Better how?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew where this was heading. Ashley set her iPad on Andrew's glass desk and started swiping through screens with the confidence of someone who'd never seen a real system crash and burn. "I've built a comprehensive payroll solution in Excel. It's cloud-based, it's intuitive, and it can handle all the calculations you're currently doing with those old SQL databases." I stared at her for a long moment. "Excel? You want to run payroll for 12,000 construction workers with a spreadsheet?" "Not just any spreadsheet," Ashley said, getting a little defensive. "This has pivot tables, conditional formatting, automated macros. It's like having a database, but user-friendly." User-friendly. That's what they always say when they want to replace something that actually works with something that looks prettier. I've been in this business long enough to know that user-friendly usually means it works great until it doesn't, and then you're screwed because nobody understands what's happening under the hood. I looked at Andrew, hoping to see some sign that he understood how insane this was. "Is this a joke?" "It's innovation, Brian," Andrew said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Ashley's model can reduce processing time by 60% and cut our IT overhead significantly." There it was. Cut our IT overhead. What they meant was they could fire me and pay Ashley a fraction of my salary. I'd seen this movie before at other companies. Young MBA comes in, promises the world with some half-baked solution, older employee gets shown the door, and then 6 months later they're begging the old guy to come back and fix the mess. "The payroll run is Friday," I said, keeping my voice level. "Today is Tuesday. If you're planning to switch systems, you need to understand what you're dealing with. This isn't just adding up hours times hourly rates." I started counting off on my fingers. "We have prevailing wage calculations for government contracts. Union versus non-union differentials that change based on the type of project and how many consecutive days a crew has worked. Equipment rental tracking that has to be cross-referenced with GPS data. OSHA compliance reporting. Multi-state tax withholdings where a guy can start the week in Texas and finish it in Colorado." Ashley was nodding along like she was following, but I could see her eyes glazing over. She thought she understood because she'd read about payroll in some textbook. "I've accounted for all of that," she interrupted. "My model includes lookup tables for all state regulations and automated tax calculations." Lookup tables. Jesus. The Arizona Prevailing Wage Database alone has 847 different job classifications, with different rates depending on which county you're working in. The union contracts have overtime rules that would make a tax lawyer's head spin. You've got guys who get time and a half after 8 hours, double time after 12, but only if they're working on certain types of projects. Then you've got hazard pay that kicks in if they're working within 500 feet of chemical storage. But the rate changes based on what chemicals and how close they are. "Ashley," I said, trying to keep the condescension out of my voice, "have you ever calculated prevailing wages for a federal highway project?" "I've studied the regulations," she said. "Studying and doing are two different things. You know what happens when you get prevailing wages wrong on a federal contract. The Department of Labor comes in and audits everything. They can fine us for every hour that was calculated incorrectly going back 3 years. Andrew waved his hand dismissively. "We'll have compliance reviews. Ashley's model includes error checking. Error checking in Excel, right. Like conditional formatting was going to catch it when some crew foreman in El Paso enters his time wrong and Ashley's lookup formula returns the wrong wage rate for 40 guys working a government job." "Brian," Patricia finally spoke up, "we'll need you to provide Ashley with all the necessary passwords and documentation for a smooth transition." "Documentation?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Most of the critical processes are in custom scripts I wrote over the past 8 years. The real knowledge isn't documented anywhere, it's in my head. That's the thing about systems that actually work in the real world. They're not built from some textbook. They're built by people who've been doing the job long enough to know where all the bodies are buried. I know that the time clock system in the Phoenix warehouse has a glitch where it sometimes double stamps entries after 11 p.m., but only on Wednesdays, and only if the network load is high. I know that the union contract for the concrete crews has a clause about meal breaks that nobody else remembers, but if you don't account for it, the guys don't get their meal penalty pay. Ashley doesn't know any of that. She's got her pretty spreadsheet with its color-coded cells and its fancy formulas, but she's never had to explain to Big Jim Patterson why his crane operators are showing up as earning less than minimum wage because some calculation went sideways. Then we'll need you to document everything before you go, Andrew said, and that's when I knew for sure they'd already made their decision. They weren't asking for my input or trying to understand why their plan was doomed. They were giving me my walking papers and expecting me to train my replacement. When's my last day? I asked. Friday, Andrew said, after the payroll run. We want to make sure there's a smooth transition. And if the transition isn't smooth, Ashley jumped in again. It will be. I've tested my model extensively. On what data? Sample data from the HR system, plus some theoretical scenarios. Sample data. Theoretical scenarios. She'd tested her revolutionary payroll solution on make-believe numbers. It was like testing a race car by driving it around a parking lot at 5 mph and then assuming it would handle the Daytona 500. I stood up, my knees popping the way they do when you've been sitting too long or when you're about to make a decision you know you'll either regret or celebrate. All right then, I guess we'll see how it goes. That's the spirit, Andrew said, already looking back at his tablet. Patricia will have your severance paperwork ready by end of business. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Ashley. One piece of advice. She looked up from her iPad, probably expecting some technical tip about database connections or file formats. When the system crashes, I said, and it will crash, don't panic. Just remember that 12,000 people are counting on their paychecks to pay rent and buy groceries. That might help you prioritize. The look on her face told me she still didn't get it. She thought this was just numbers on a screen. She had no idea she was about to be responsible for people's lives. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't try to explain why Ashley's approach was doomed to fail worse than a paper airplane in a tornado. Sometimes the best teacher is experience, and Ashley was about to get an education that no MBA program could provide. The next 3 days were like watching a slow-motion car crash. I spent Wednesday and Thursday doing exactly what they asked, documenting everything I could think of, creating user guides, and writing step-by-step instructions. But here's the thing about complex systems that have evolved over 8 years. You can't document institutional knowledge. You can't write down the gut feeling you get when something doesn't look right, or the instinct that tells you to double-check a calculation because it seems off by just enough to matter. Ashley shadowed me those 2 days, taking notes on her iPad and asking questions that showed she had no clue what she was getting into. Why do you manually verify the Arizona wage classifications? She asked Wednesday morning as I ran through the pre-payroll checks. Because the state database has been corrupted since 2019, I explained. It shows the right wage rates, but about 3% of the job classifications return wrong county codes. If you don't catch it, guys working in Phoenix get paid Tucson rates, which is about $4 an hour difference. Can't we just fix the database? It's a state system. We don't control it. We just have to work around it. She made a note on her iPad. I could see her typing fix state database issue like that was something she could handle with a phone call. Thursday afternoon, Ashley was feeling confident enough to start importing real data into her Excel model. I watched her upload the raw time files from our 47 different job sites across 4 states. The spreadsheet immediately started lagging. It's just loading, she said, clicking refresh repeatedly while Excel churned through 12,000 employee records. But I could see what was happening. Her lookup formulas were hitting circular references because she didn't understand how prevailing wage calculations cascade. When you've got federal, state, and local wage requirements that can all apply to the same job, you can't just use a simple VLOOKUP. You need conditional logic that checks multiple criteria in a specific order. Ashley, I said carefully, you might want to test that on a smaller dataset first. It'll be fine, she replied. But I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice as Excel's memory usage spiked and the program started freezing. Friday morning came, and it was time for the official handoff. Ashley showed up early with her laptop and the kind of nervous energy you see in rookie drivers before their first NASCAR race. Ready to make history? She asked, trying to sound confident. I gathered my personal items while she set up at my workstation. Coffee mug that said World's OKest Database Admin, photo of my Harley Davidson, and a bottle of bourbon I kept for emergencies. Seemed appropriate to take it with me, Something told me they'd be needing it more than I would. The bank cutoff for direct deposits is noon, I reminded her. After that, people don't get paid until Monday. Got it, Ashley said, already focused on her screen where Excel was grinding through the payroll data like a wood chipper trying to process a telephone pole. I started to leave, then stopped. Ashley, one more thing. When this goes sideways, and it will go sideways, don't try to fix it by running the calculations again. Each time you reprocess, you create duplicate entries in the system. Fix the problem first, then rerun. She wasn't really listening. She was staring at her screen where the spreadsheet was showing error values in about half the cells. Patricia walked me to the security desk where Eddie Morrison was waiting with my severance paperwork. Eddie's a good guy, ex-Marine who understands the value of knowing your job inside and out. Sorry to see you go, Brian, Eddie said as I signed the documents. This doesn't feel right. It's just business, Eddie. Bad business, but business nonetheless. I drove home in my pickup truck, windows down, Creedence on the radio. I should have been angry, but mostly I felt like I was watching a disaster movie where you know the asteroid is going to hit, but the characters haven't figured it out yet. My phone started buzzing around 10:30 a.m. Text from Kevin Martinez, one of the payroll clerks. Brian, Ashley's spreadsheet is showing weird numbers. My overtime calculation says I worked negative hours last week. Then another text from Danny Walsh in the Phoenix office. Dude, according to this payroll report, I make $847 an hour as a concrete finisher. I wish. By 11 o'clock a.m., my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Guys from all over our territory were seeing their pay stubs in the employee portal, and nothing made sense. Employee ID numbers were getting mixed up with social security numbers. Job classifications were scrambled. Crane operators were showing up as office clerks, concrete finishers were listed as executives. The funniest one came from Tony Ramirez, a foreman in El Paso. Brian, my pay stub says I worked 2,847 hours last week and my net pay is negative $12,000. Did I rob the company or did the company rob me? I could picture exactly what had happened. During the data import, Ashley had mixed up the column headers. Employee ID numbers were being used as hours worked, and hours worked were being treated as pay rates. Excel was trying to calculate wages using social security numbers as multipliers. But the real disaster was still coming. The weird numbers in the employee portal were just the appetizer. The main course would be served at noon when the bank tried to process Ashley's payroll file for electronic deposits. At 11:45 a.m., my phone rang. It was Patricia from HR. Brian. Her voice was tight with panic. We need to talk. Ashley's payroll file is showing some irregularities. Irregularities? According to her calculations, we owe the federal government $2.3 million in tax withholdings this week, but we only collected $180,000 from employee paychecks. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck listening to Patricia explain how Ashley's Excel model had managed to create what was essentially a mathematical black hole. Also, Patricia continued, the bank is questioning why we're trying to direct deposit $47,000 to one concrete mixer in Albuquerque, while simultaneously deducting $23,000 from a crane operator's pay for something called equipment rental recovery fees. Has anyone told Andrew yet? He's in meetings all day. Ashley said she could fix it. Famous last words. I'd heard them before from every overconfident rookie who thought they could patch a sinking ship with duct tape and good intentions. Patricia, I said, you might want to cancel those meetings. By 2 o'clock p.m., Southwest Building Materials wasn't a construction company anymore. It was a disaster zone. The bank had rejected Ashley's payroll file so hard it probably left scorch marks on their servers. According to their automated response, we were attempting to transfer invalid amounts to invalid accounts using invalid routing protocols. The employee portal had crashed under the weight of 12,000 workers trying to figure out why their pay stubs looked like they'd been written by a drunk accountant having a nervous breakdown. Some guys were showing overtime rates of $847 an hour. Others had negative salaries and somehow owed the company money for the privilege of working there. But the real fireworks started when the union got involved. Big Jim Patterson has been representing construction workers for 25 years. He's built like a linebacker, talks like a truck driver, and has zero patience for corporate nonsense. When his guys don't get paid, Jim doesn't send strongly worded emails. He shuts things down. By 3 o'clock p.m., Jim was standing on the back of a pickup truck outside our main office with a megaphone, and trucks were lining up behind him. Southwest Building Materials thinks they can play games with working people's paychecks. His voice boomed across the parking lot. If they can't figure out how to pay us, maybe we should stop working for them. The wildcat strike spread faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Phoenix sites shut down first, then Albuquerque, then the highway project outside Denver. By 4:00 p.m., every Southwest Building Materials job site in 4 states had gone quiet. 12,000 workers sitting in their trucks, posting videos on social media, calling local news stations. The footage was beautiful in a tragic sort of way. Aerial shots of idle construction sites, interviews with workers holding pay stubs that made no mathematical sense. Union reps explaining to reporters how a company that builds half the infrastructure in the Southwest couldn't figure out basic payroll. My phone kept buzzing with updates from Eddie and the other guys still inside the building. Ashley's locked herself in the conference room, Eddie texted. She's been trying to fix her spreadsheet for 3 hours, but every time she changes something, it breaks something else. Another text. Andrew's been screaming at IT support all afternoon. Apparently, Ashley deleted the original data when she tried to reload the file. That made me chuckle. Of course she did. When you're panicking and something's not working, the natural impulse is to start over. But when you start over in Excel without backing up your work, you lose everything. Ashley had just erased the only copy of the raw payroll data, and the backup systems only worked if someone who knew what they were doing set them up properly. Tuesday morning, I was sitting on my porch drinking coffee and reading news articles about our payroll crisis when my phone rang. Andrew Rodriguez, Brian. His voice sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. We need to talk. Morning, Andrew. Saw you on the news last night. Nice interview. I especially liked the part where you said the problems were caused by unforeseen technical complications during a routine system upgrade. Cut the jokes. The state labor board is opening investigations in 4 states. The union is talking about a class action lawsuit. The bank froze our operating accounts because our payroll file made their fraud detection system think we'd been hacked. Sounds like quite a situation. I need you to come back. Consulting basis. Name your price. I'd been waiting for this call since Friday afternoon. $15,000, cash, up front, plus a new contract at double my old salary. Done. I'm not finished. I want a public apology from you and Ashley posted on the company website, admitting that the payroll problems were caused by premature implementation of an inadequate system. Long silence. Then, fine. And one more thing. I report directly to the CIO now, not to operations. I'm done dealing with people who think Excel is enterprise software. Whatever you need, Brian. Just fix this. I drove back to the office Wednesday morning. The parking lot still had union guys camped out, but they waved when they saw my truck. Jim Patterson walked over as I was getting out. Brian, tell me you're here to save our asses. Working on it, Jim. You guys should see some action by Thursday morning. What about back pay for the time we've been sitting here, every penny, with overtime for the guys who were scheduled to work? I walked into the building like I owned it, because for the next few days I basically did. The server room felt like coming home after a long trip. I fired up my workstation and started digging through the wreckage Ashley had left behind. It was worse than I'd expected. She hadn't just corrupted the payroll data. She'd managed to lock the database tables, create circular references in the tax calculation modules, and somehow convince the system that we employed 847,000 people named Error. It took me 18 hours of solid work, but I rebuilt everything from the archived transaction logs, real backups stored on systems Ashley didn't even know existed. By Thursday morning, I had a clean payroll file ready for the bank. I hit the transmit button at 6:00 a.m. The electronic funds transfer went through without a hitch. 12,000 workers would wake up to find their correct paychecks waiting, plus overtime pay for the days they'd lost sitting in the parking lot. Friday morning, I walked into Andrew's office. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. It's done, I said. Everyone's been paid correctly, including compensation for the strike days. Thank you, he said quietly. Where's Ashley? Reassigned to marketing research. Turns out family connections only go so far when you cost the company millions of dollars and nearly trigger a federal investigation. And my new office? Andrew gestured toward the corner office with the windows overlooking the equipment yard. All yours. I had them put in a new coffee machine. I walked to my new desk and sat down in the leather chair. Through the window, I could see the construction sites coming back to life, cranes moving, trucks rolling out with full crews. My phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. Heard Ashley's working in marketing now. Think she can handle calculating ad impressions? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the bottle of good bourbon I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Sometimes experience trumps innovation. And sometimes, when corporate tries to fix what isn't broken, they learn the hard way that some jobs require more than just an MBA and an Excel spreadsheet. I poured a shot into my coffee mug and raised it toward the window. Here's to keeping the beast running and making sure working people get what they've earned. That's worth drinking to.